She swore she would never fall for the man she hated, until one reckless night in Las Vegas bound her to him forever. When secrets, betrayal, and a dangerous health scare threaten everything, will hate turn to love, or destroy them both? Support this channel by subscribing, like, and comment for more thrilling love stories. The neon glow of Las Vegas stretched endlessly into the night, painting the desert skyline in swirls of electric pinks, greens, and blues. The streets buzzed with life. Tourists in sequin dresses stumbled out of casinos, street performers balanced precariously on stilts, and the relentless rhythm of slot machines thumped through the air like a heartbeat. For most, it was paradise. For Tessy, it was the perfect place to try and forget a man she had spent years loathing. Tessy Coleman adjusted the strap of her black clutch as she strode through the grand lobby of the Bellagio, heels clicking sharply on marble floors. At 26, she had carved out a reputation as one of Las Vegas's most ambitious event planners. Her reputation for perfection and tenacity had earned her the contract of a lifetime, the city's most exclusive charity gala, an event that could open doors to international clientele. But the universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. Her pulse quickened the moment she stepped into the room designated for the gala walkthrough. Behind the polished reception desk stood a man who could only be described as infuriatingly perfect. Julio Romano. Julio, 32, was a fixture in the Las Vegas elite. Casino magnate, nightclub owner, investor extraordinaire. He had charm, money, and a confidence that made men resent him and women swoon. And he had humiliated her family 2 years ago when his business decisions had contributed to her father losing a critical investment. The humiliation had burned her family's reputation, and Julio had walked away smirking. Tessy had never forgiven him. Never. "Miss Coleman," he drawled, leaning casually against the reception desk, his dark hair perfectly slicked back and eyes the color of storm clouds. "I didn't expect to see you here." Tessy stopped dead, swallowing the bile that rose at the sight of his smug grin. "I could say the same, Mr. Romano," she replied coolly, arching one brow. "I didn't expect the Bellagio to hire someone with such a colorful business history." Julio's grin widened, just enough to show teeth that were annoyingly perfect. "Colorful, huh? I prefer memorable." He stepped forward, the scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. "And here I thought we left the past in the past." Tessy's fingers curled around her clutch, nails digging into the leather. "Some things," she said slowly, "aren't so easy to forget." He raised a brow, clearly amused. "That sounds like a challenge." Tessy ground her teeth. Of course he would make it a challenge. That was Julio Romano's specialty, making life hell for anyone who dared oppose him. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "I'm here for business, not to reminisce about the past," she said firmly, striding past him toward the ballroom. She needed to focus, to ignore the flaring heat in her chest that wasn't from anger alone. Julio followed, effortlessly matching her pace. "Business, sure," he said. "But you'll forgive me if I supervise. After all, it's my property." Tessy stopped mid-step, spinning to face him, heels clicking sharply. "Excuse me?" "Your gala," he said smoothly, spreading his hands. "My venue. I think it's only fair I have some say in how it's run. Don't you?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't need supervision, Mr. Romano. I'm perfectly capable of running an event without a casino kingpin breathing down my neck." Julio's lips twitched in a smirk. "Casino kingpin," he repeated, mock seriously. "I like the sound of that. You know, you've grown bolder since our last encounter." Tessy felt a flicker of annoyance and, against her better judgment, something else, the undeniable, infuriating pull of attraction. She stomped her heel to regain control. "I've also grown tired of people like you interfering in everything my family and I do." Julio's smirk faded slightly, replaced with a faint look of curiosity, or maybe challenge. "Is that so? You'll have to show me just how capable you are, Miss Coleman. Consider this a test." Tessy opened her mouth to retort, but a voice from behind interrupted them. "Julio, we're waiting on the gala layout approval," a young assistant said nervously, clearly sensing tension in the air. Julio glanced at Tessy with a glance that could have been an apology, or a promise of trouble. "Looks like we'll be working together sooner than you thought," he said before turning and walking toward the conference room. Tessy exhaled sharply and followed. Working with him was going to be hell, she knew. Every step she took beside him reminded her of every slight, every insult, every humiliation he had ever caused her family. And yet, there was something in the way he moved, the way he watched her with that sharp, calculating gaze, that made it impossible to ignore him. The walkthrough of the venue was tense. Julio suggested minor changes, each one tinged with a tone that seemed almost personal. Tessy countered with precision, refusing to give him any leverage. "You want the centerpieces to be taller?" Julio asked, watching her carefully. "Yes," Tessy said, meeting his gaze squarely. "They need to stand out against the chandeliers. The room should scream elegance, not excess." Julio nodded slowly as if evaluating her audacity. "Fair enough. You've got taste. I'll give you that." She ignored the slight warmth that crawled into her chest at his compliment. Taste didn't erase betrayal. As the walkthrough continued, they bickered over lighting, seating arrangements, and even the choice of floral arrangements. Tessy could feel herself being tested at every turn, her patience stretched, her anger simmering, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her falter. Hours passed, and the final moment came when they stood in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by empty chairs and glittering chandeliers. Julio finally broke the silence. "You're good, you know," he said quietly, almost reluctant. "Better than I expected." Tessy's lips curved into a small, sharp smile. "I told you I don't need your approval." He chuckled softly, and for a moment the tension between them eased. But then, in true Julio fashion, he leaned closer, just enough for her to feel the heat radiating off him. "Maybe not. But that doesn't mean I won't keep watching. Consider it supervision with style." Tessy swallowed hard, forcing herself to take a step back. "I'll take my chances." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Tessy left the Bellagio with her mind racing. Julio Romano wasn't just an obstacle. He was a storm she couldn't predict, a storm that made her pulse quicken despite every instinct screaming at her to run. Later that night, Tessy walked the strip alone, letting the neon lights blur into streaks of color as she tried to calm her racing heart. She hated him. She really did. But somewhere beneath the layers of anger, beneath the resentment and pride, a part of her remembered why she had hated leaving Las Vegas in the first place. The city had a way of exposing truths, and Julio Romano had a way of exposing hers. As she paused to watch a fountain show erupt in graceful arcs of water and light, her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Julio called. "Wants a final meeting tomorrow morning." Tessy's fingers tightened around her phone. Tomorrow morning. Just the thought of seeing him again made her stomach twist with a mixture of dread and something far more dangerous. "Why does he get under my skin so much?" she muttered to herself, shaking her head. She didn't have an answer. But one thing was certain. In a city that thrived on excess, risk, and temptation, Julio Romano was about to become her biggest challenge yet. And Tessy knew with a sinking certainty that this challenge was far from over. As the neon lights reflected in her eyes, Tessy realized that Las Vegas wasn't just a city of chance. It was a city of collision, and she had just collided with the storm of her life. The gala was everything Tessy had envisioned, and more. The Bellagio ballroom gleamed under the glow of crystal chandeliers, the tables adorned with golden accents and towering floral arrangements that swayed elegantly with every whisper of air. The event drew Vegas's elite, influencers, and celebrities, each more glamorous than the last. Tessy moved through the crowd with practiced ease, clipboard in hand, ensuring that every detail matched her vision. But no amount of glitter or perfection could drown out the storm simmering in the back of her mind. Julio Romano. He was there, of course, as if fate had placed him directly in her path. Julio moved with that dangerous ease she hated so much, charming, confident, magnetic. Guests greeted him warmly, but his eyes never left her. Every glance from him was like a spark against dry kindling, threatening to ignite the carefully built walls around her heart. Tessy's lips pressed into a thin line as she ignored him, focusing on the gala, on the guests, on every little detail, but Julio had a way of finding her, no matter where she went. "Impressive work," he said smoothly, materializing at her side, his dark eyes glinting under the chandelier lights. "You've outdone yourself." Tessy barely managed a stiff nod. "Thank you. The night's success depends on more than just me, though." He smirked. "I'm sure. But you're the reason it looks perfect. I'll admit it." Tessy clenched her jaw, irritated by the hint of praise that tugged at a part of her she refused to acknowledge. "You'll forgive me if I don't care what you admit." Julio leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You know, I've missed seeing you like this, commanding a room, beautiful and stubborn as ever." Her stomach twisted, a mixture of frustration and something else she refused to name. Tessy stepped back, forcing herself to maintain composure. "We're professionals, Mr. Romano. Don't forget that." He laughed softly, a deep, intoxicating sound. "Of course. Professionals who can't seem to stay away from each other, it seems." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to shove him away and never look back. But her body had other ideas. The tension, the attraction, had been simmering under the surface since their first confrontation. Tonight it was on the verge of boiling over. As the gala drew to a close, Tessy began directing staff to clean up, her mind spinning with exhaustion and frustration. Julio appeared again, offering his hand to escort her through the crowd. She hesitated, every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but then she realized she was exhausted and needed to leave. Reluctantly she accepted. Once they stepped into the quieter halls of the penthouse level, away from the press, the guests, the chaos, the air between them changed. Julio's hand lingered near hers, brushing against her wrist in a way that made her pulse race. "You've been avoiding me all night," he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. "Why?" "I haven't been avoiding you," she snapped, sharper than she intended. "I've been working." "Sure," he said with a knowing smirk, stepping closer, so close that the heat from his body radiated onto hers. "Working? You're so convincing." Tessy's breath hitched. She wanted to step back, but the thought of walking away from him, from this tension, seemed impossible. Julio's presence was magnetic, intoxicating, and maddening all at once. "Stop," she whispered, barely able to get the word out. This can't happen." But he didn't stop. Instead, he closed the distance, his hand lightly brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Why not?" he asked, his lips barely an inch from hers. "Because you hate me? Because you think I'll ruin everything?" Tessy's eyes burned with unshed tears, anger, fear, desire. "Because it's wrong." He smirked, gently cupping her face with both hands. "Then let's be wrong together." Before she could protest, he leaned in and the collision of lips was electric. An eruption of suppressed desire, of years of tension, of anger turned into something urgent and raw. Tessy tried to pull away at first, but her body betrayed her. Every sharp word, every heated glance from the past dissolved into passion, and she found herself pressed against him, responding to the magnetism she had spent years denying. Julio's hand slid along her waist, pulling her closer as if he couldn't bear even a fraction of distance between them. Tessy's heart hammered against her rib cage, mind screaming, body surrendering. Their heated encounter was a battle of wills, but tonight, desire won. Minutes, or was it hours? Later the intensity ebbed, leaving them both breathless, tangled in sheets of the penthouse guest room, their hearts pounding in sync. Tessy stared at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "This doesn't mean anything," she said finally, her voice shaking as though saying it would make it true. Julio tilted his head, eyes dark and intense. "Nothing?" "Nothing," she repeated, firming her jaw. "It was a mistake." He leaned close again, brushing a kiss against her temple. "It doesn't feel like a mistake." Tessy swallowed, her throat dry. I need to go." Julio nodded, though the hurt flash in his eyes betrayed him. "I'll let you go, for now." She dressed quickly, avoiding his gaze as she left the penthouse, the city lights of Vegas twinkling mockingly outside the window. The streets seemed brighter, louder, more alive than before, and yet Tessy felt hollow, haunted by what had happened, and by the undeniable spark that Julio had ignited in her, one she would never admit to anyone, not even herself. Back in her small apartment, she sank onto her couch, trembling from adrenaline and emotion. She hated him. She hated herself. And somehow, impossibly, she hated that she wanted him again. Julio Romano had won the battle tonight, though she refused to let him win the war. She had survived. She had escaped. But deep down, Tessy knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was far from over. And somewhere in the dark corners of her mind, she feared the next collision. Because in Las Vegas the stakes were always high, and the city had a way of forcing truth into the brightest, most unexpected lights. Tessy sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small plastic stick she had taken earlier that morning. Positive. Her hands shook and her chest felt tight as though her lungs had forgotten how to work. She had hoped, maybe foolishly, that her life would go on as normal, that the reckless night with Julio Romano would remain nothing more than a mistake. But now there was no denying it. She was pregnant. And the father was Julio. Julio. The man she hated, the man whose very existence made her blood boil, and who, now, would claim a right to a part of her life she refused to share. Tessy sat frozen in the quiet of her apartment, trying to plot a way forward. She needed to keep this secret. She needed to protect herself and her baby. And she certainly didn't need Julio showing up, with that smug expression and arrogant confidence, ready to take over her life. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Her phone buzzed, a message from her longtime friend and confidant, Marcy. Tessy smiled weakly, grateful for a familiar face. Until she read the text. Julio's cousin Leo called me. He knows. About the baby. He wants to know everything. Be careful. Tessy froze. What? Her fingers flew over the phone. Why would you? How could you? A call came through almost immediately. It was Marcy. Tessy, listen, I didn't mean for it to get out. Marcy's voice trembled. Leo was asking questions. I didn't want him suspicious. I thought you'd want him to know. Tessy's hands shook as she gripped the phone. You told him I'm pregnant? You told Julio's cousin? I didn't know what else to do. I thought it was safer if you had someone on the inside. Marcy pleaded. Tessy's head dropped into her hands. She couldn't believe it. She had trusted Marcy. Trusted her. And now her secret had been leaked to someone she had barely tolerated, someone whose very family controlled Julio's life, and whose curiosity and influence could easily reach him. I can't believe this, Tessy muttered, voice shaking with a mix of fury and despair. Do you know what you've done? If Julio finds out, if he comes after me, I can't. I'm sorry. I didn't think. Please, Tessy, I was trying to help. Marcy's voice cracked. Tessy hung up, running her fingers through her hair. She needed a plan. She couldn't trust anyone. Not Marcy. Not her casual relationship with Leo. And she certainly didn't want Julio barging into her life like the storm he always brought with him. She spent the next few days in a haze, avoiding messages, calls, and people she used to trust. But of course, secrets in Las Vegas were like neon lights. They never stayed hidden. Word traveled fast, and soon Julio Romano knew. The knock at her apartment door sent her heart into her throat. She froze, breath catching. She wasn't ready. She wasn't prepared for confrontation. And yet there he was, Julio. Standing in the doorway, looking composed, confident, and impossibly infuriating. Tessy, he said, stepping inside before she could respond, eyes dark and stormy. We need to talk. Tessy's stomach twisted. I don't think we do. Oh, I think we do, Julio said evenly, his gaze unwavering. I know about the baby. Her jaw dropped. You know? Yes, he said, stepping closer. And I also know that your friend Marcy has a tendency to be careless. He didn't sound angry. Not yet. He sounded calm. Too calm. Dangerous calm. Tessy's hands clenched into fists. You can't just barge in here and... I can, he interrupted, cutting her off, his voice low and firm. Because that child is mine, Tessy. And I'm not leaving you or the baby alone. I'll fight legally if I have to. I will do whatever it takes to be there for my child. Tessy shook her head, anger and fear battling inside her. You don't understand. You can't just dictate what happens. I don't want your help. I don't need you. Julio's eyes softened for a brief second, revealing a side of him she had never seen before, vulnerable, almost human. I'm not doing this for me, he said quietly. I'm doing it for our child. You don't have to trust me, yet. But I won't let you fight this alone. She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the flutter of emotion in her chest. The betrayal from Marcy, the pressure from Julio, the fear of what might happen. It was overwhelming. And yet, beneath the fear, a strange, reluctant relief stirred. Tessy started, then stopped herself. I need time. I need space. Julio nodded, though the hurt flickered briefly in his stormy eyes. You'll have time, he said. But know this, I will be involved, Tessy. Whether you like it or not. The next few weeks were a battlefield. Tessy tried to avoid Julio, avoiding his calls and emails, even changing the route she took to work events. But the news had spread quickly, through Marcy, through gossip, and through Leo, and Julio was relentless. Every encounter with him was charged with tension. One evening at a lawyer's office they argued, voices low but fierce. You think I'm here for me? Tessy spat, hands trembling. You think I'll just hand over control to you? You have no idea what it's like to. I know, Julio said, cutting her off. I know enough. I know I made mistakes. But I also know I won't walk away from my child. And I won't let anyone harm her or you, not while I'm standing. Tessy's chest heaved. She wanted to push him away, to scream, to fight, but his eyes were not just determined, they were soft, vulnerable, protective. And for the first time, she glimpsed a side of Julio Romano that terrified and tempted her all at once. You can't just decide this, she whispered, voice breaking. I'm not deciding, he said, moving closer, his voice low and steady. I'm claiming my responsibility. I'm claiming my place. And I won't apologize for that. Tessy's knees weakened, her pride and anger clashing violently with the part of her that longed to accept his protection, to let him be there for her and the baby. She shook her head, backing up. I need to figure this out. Julio followed slowly, not forcing her, but closing the space between them with silent determination. Take all the time you need, he said, voice gentle now. But I'm not going anywhere. Tessy's hands trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself. She hated him. She feared him. She wanted to scream at him for the chaos he had brought into her life. And yet, somewhere deep inside, she knew that Julio Romano, arrogant, infuriating, magnetic, was now part of her life in a way she couldn't escape. The betrayal, the pregnancy, the threats, they had broken the wall she had built around her heart. And as she sank into the quiet of her apartment, Tessy realized one truth she could no longer ignore. Her life, and her heart, would never be the same again. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension. Tessy avoided Julio as best she could, but he was everywhere. At her doctor's office, waiting outside her apartment, even showing up quietly at events where he knew she'd be working. He never raised his voice, never pressured, but his presence was like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Tessy hated him for it. Hated how stubborn he was. Hated how much she feared what he made her feel. And yet, somewhere beneath the fear, a tiny voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the villain she had painted in her mind. Still, she wasn't ready to admit it. That night, Tessy sat in her apartment, exhausted after a long event. Her back ached, her feet hurt, and her head pounded. She pressed a hand against her stomach, whispering softly to the tiny life inside her. "You're all I need," she murmured, her voice breaking. "It's just you and me. We'll be fine without him." But then the sharp pain struck. It started as a dull cramp, but within minutes, it was searing, tearing through her abdomen like fire. Tessy gasped, doubling over, panic flooding her chest. She grabbed her phone, dialing Marcy, but her hands shook so badly the call dropped. Her vision blurred. She sank to the floor, clutching her stomach. And then, as if fate had orchestrated it, Julio's voice filled the room. "Tessy? Tessy." He had been outside, dropping off groceries without knocking, and the sound of her collapse had brought him in. He rushed to her side, eyes wide with terror as he saw the pain etched across her face. "Don't touch me," Tessy gasped, weak and trembling. "The hell I won't," Julio snapped, scooping her into his arms as though she weighed nothing. "You need a hospital, now." Through the haze of pain, Tessy saw the fear in his eyes, raw, unguarded, unshakable. For the first time she realized this wasn't about control or winning. This was about her. About their child. About his love, whether she wanted it or not. At the hospital, doctors and nurses swarmed around her. Julio refused to leave her side, his hand gripping hers tightly, his face pale but resolute. Tessy wanted to push him away, but the truth was, his presence steadied her. His warmth anchored her in the chaos. Hours later, the doctor came out with a small smile. "The baby is stable. It was a scare, stress-related. She'll need rest, less pressure. Both mother and child are fine, but she cannot keep overexerting herself." Relief washed over Julio like a tidal wave. He turned to Tessy, his voice hoarse, breaking. "You scared the life out of me." Tessy lay in the hospital bed, pale but alive, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. For once she didn't fight him. She let him hold her hand, let him sit close. "I told you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't need you." Julio leaned forward, brushing her damp hair from her forehead, his touch gentle. "You may not need me, Tessy," he said softly, "but I need you, and I need our baby. I don't care how much you hate me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving you're not alone." Her throat tightened, emotions crashing through her like a flood. For so long she had built walls, convinced herself that love was weakness, that Julio was danger. But here he was, unguarded, broken open, his heart in her hands. "Why?" she asked, her voice raw. "Why fight so hard for me, for us?" His eyes locked on hers, steady and unwavering. "Because the night I touched you, Tessy, I knew. I knew you weren't a mistake. You're my fire, my fight, my everything. And I will never walk away from you, no matter how many times you push me." Tessy's tears spilled freely now. She wanted to hate him, but her heart betrayed her. The walls crumbled, brick by brick, under the weight of his truth. "Julio," she whispered, her voice breaking. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to stop him, but she didn't. This kiss wasn't reckless or fueled by anger like before. It was tender, desperate, full of promises unspoken. It was the kiss of a man who had almost lost everything, and a woman finally realizing she had everything to gain. When they pulled apart, Tessy's hand instinctively went to her stomach over his. Their fingers entwined. "I don't know how to trust you," she admitted, voice trembling. Julio pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Then let me earn it one day at a time. For you. For our child." The beeping of the monitors filled the silence between them, steady and sure, like the rhythm of their new beginning. For the first time in weeks, Tessy allowed herself to close her eyes and rest, knowing she wasn't alone anymore. And as Julio held her hand, whispering promises only she could hear, Tessy realized the unthinkable. The man she had hated, fought, resisted with every ounce of her being, had become the man she couldn't imagine her future without.